dark haze. Ladies of the night with eyes of red, vampires in the alleys where good men dread, wolfmen howling beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
Good evening, folks. Thank y'all for joining us on another edition of the Nightmare Hunters podcast. I'm your host, D.A. Robertson, and always, I'm joined by my brothers from the mothers. Steve Wildman Monroe is in the house tonight. Well, like a rare sighting, like a Patterson Gimlet footage. We've got Kerry Pocket Doc Davis and Robbie Jed Rains, all here from various parts of the country, and Steve from across town. But before we jump into the deep woods and dark hollows tonight, we want to take a moment for you guys, our community. If you guys got a prayer request for yourself, for a family, for a friend, for someone going through a hard time, just let us know. Because around here we pray for each other. And we've already got a few folks already on the list this week. Miss Lene, keep her in your thoughts and prayers. Robbie and his family, Doc and his family, keep them in your prayers. Maggie's going through some health issues. Y'all know Maggie. She's been on the show. And my sister Becky got some bad news today. The result of the biopsy came in, and then the cancer in her liver has metastasized. And they're going to start aggressive chemo and are discussing surgery options. We'll know more soon. But would appreciate if you guys keep praying for her as well. But before we jump into things, well, first person I want to say how the heck are you is Wildman. How you been, brother? It has been a minute since you've been on the show.
Been a minute. I hardly have a day off of work anymore, but I had a rare Wednesday off. I thought I'd appear like the cryptid hominid himself. So,
Well, we're glad you got to be here with us tonight, brother. We've missed you.
Oh, glad to be here. I missed you guys, and the virtual guys out there too.
Robbie, how you doing, brother?
Tolerable.
Doc, how the heck are you, brother?
Wyatt, I am rolling.
I'm
up about like the rest of y'all. I'm upright and breathing, and grateful that the Lord gave me another day. That's about it.
What about this heat, boys?
Oh,
I don't know where y'all are at, but here in Missouri, you could fry an egg on the sidewalk.
Yeah, my whole state's on fire right now. I mean, basically the four corner states are all on fire right now, and
that's rough.
Air is horrible. Bless those firefighters' hearts and the people who's in the way of it. And it's hot. I think it was 93 here at the house today with 10% humidity and 20 to 30 mile an hour winds. So how bad how spicy it is up in the mountains up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
so
we're
hot
living down in that area.
Man,
That's rough, especially in fire season.
yeah,
I'd a whole lot rather fight a house fire than I had a brush fire.
brother, you ain't lying.
That was my least favorite thing to do when I'm in the fire service was brush fire.
Yeah, and that's what happened to those 3 firefighters. There's 5 of them. 3 of them are killed on duty, and then the other 2 are badly injured. They had a burnover. That's the thing that scares me. That wind shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And you ain't outrunning that, man. That stuff's like a freaking tornado.
It don't take much for it to do it.
No.
Especially you get close to the Rockies, the direction of the wind is a suggestion. It could change in 5 minutes.
100%, man. It is sketchy.
Well, folks,
we don't have the
keep everyone in
here.
the path of those fires and the firefighters and everybody that's working
Amen.
to try to protect lives and property. Keep all those folks in your
Amen.
prayers. It's a rough one out there.
Amen.
We don't have the fires, but it's so hot and humid here. Satan's saying, "Y'all just stay up there. I want to stay down here where it's cool."
Exactly. But we're going to jump in this one tonight. Tonight is episode 420 for those of you who partake. This episode's called Bigfoot: The Last Tribe, a behavioral case for a relic human population. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying we're claiming Bigfoot is a relic hominid. What we are saying is, what if we've been asking the wrong questions all along? So welcome back to the Nightmare Hunters podcast. Again, I'm D.A. Roberts, and as always, I got these 3 idiots with me, but proud to have them and proud to be with them. But before we get started, I want to thank all of you guys, our subscribers and channel members and our Patreon supporters. We appreciate each and every one of you guys, and if you're new to the channel and you enjoy these kinds of discussions, we'd love to have you stick around. And it's funny how some episodes come together. Sometimes we'll stumble across a case and immediately know we've got an episode. And sometimes one of us brings something to the table and the whole thing practically writes itself. Then there are other episodes like this one that start off with a completely different conversation and refuse to leave you alone afterwards. That's kind of what happened here. Yeah, after we finished the Gugway episode we did a few weeks back, I kept finding myself thinking about parts of that discussion even days later. Not because I was obsessed with the Gugway itself, but because we spent a lot of time talking about human history and how much bigger that story has become over the last few decades. It really wasn't all that long ago that most people had a pretty simple picture of the past. There were ancient humans, there were modern humans, and that was about it. Then every few years it seemed like somebody dug up something that complicated the picture a little more. The thing that stuck with me wasn't any particular fossil or discovery. It was the realization that for most of human history, we weren't necessarily alone on this planet. There were other populations out there. Some of them overlapped with us, some of them interacted with us, and some of them vanished entirely. At least that's what the evidence tells us, not to mention the good folks over at the British Museum and the Smithsonian. So, I'm sitting here one evening thinking about all this, and my mind wandered over to Bigfoot, which probably won't surprise anybody who's listened to this show for very long. But what did surprise me was the question that popped into my head, because it's one I should have been asking a long time ago. Not whether Bigfoot could be a relic human population. People have been asking that question forever. What surprised me was realizing that we'd spent years talking around that question without ever really stopping to look directly at it. The reason that it stuck with me is because when I started thinking back through old episodes, I realized that some of the conversations we'd had over the years don't really make sense if all you're doing is asking what Bigfoot looks like. Combs Ferry doesn't make sense from that perspective. Robbie and Steve can both attest to that. A lot of other things we've discussed involving communication doesn't make sense from that perspective either. Some of the conversations we've had about tracking territorial behavior and even some of the witness reports we've covered over the years become a lot more interesting when you stop focusing on the appearance of the creature and start paying attention to its behavior. And I don't mean that as a conclusion, I mean it as a question. The thing that keeps bothering me was the behavior always seems to get treated like a secondary detail, and I couldn't really figure out why. Maybe it's because behavior is harder to photograph. Maybe it's because you can't put it in a display case, or and because it's easier to argue over than a footprint than it is to argue over a pattern. Honestly, I'm not sure what the reason behind it is. What I do know is that when I got started going back through old notes and old episodes, I found myself paying attention to different things than I had the first time around. I wasn't looking at height estimates anymore. I wasn't thinking about shoulder width or footprint length. I kept finding myself drifting back to the same kinds of questions. Why does observation behavior show up so often? Why do so many witnesses describe feeling like they're being watched before they ever describe seeing anything? And why do so many encounters involve concealment? Why do communication reports keep showing up year after year in places that have nothing to do with one another? And maybe there's a perfectly ordinary explanation for all that. Maybe those things aren't connected at all. But the more I looked at them, the harder it became to simply dismiss them as unrelated. The funny thing is that none of this made me more certain about anything. If anything, it had the opposite effect. It made me realize how many assumptions I'd probably been carrying around without even noticing it. The reports hadn't changed. The evidence hadn't changed. What changed was the lens I was looking through. And once that happened, I found myself going back through the years of discussions we'd had on this show and looking at them in a completely different angle. And that's where this episode came from. Not a conclusion, not a theory, just a question that wouldn't leave me alone. Steve, you want to start us out with segment 1?
Sure will. Had to unmute myself there. So one of the places that came to our minds when we started thinking about this stuff was the Joe Bald. And the reason that surprised us is because we weren't really thinking about the figure anymore. When that footage first came out, we were just like everybody else. You know, we want to know what was behind the tree. That's a question everyone asks. It's the most obvious question. You're looking at a piece of footage where there's clearly something there, and naturally your brain wants to identify it. Is it a person? Is it a bear? Is it something unusual? Is it something we never identified? That's where the conversation usually starts, and most of the time, that's where it stays. The more time that passed, though, the more we found ourselves thinking about something else entirely. We started wondering why that particular piece of footage kept sticking with us when there are countless videos, photographs, and witness reports that come and go every year. Everybody's got their picture with the red circle on it, most of them get discussed for a while, and then everybody moves on to the next thing. For whatever reason, we kept going back to Joe Bald, and eventually we realized it wasn't because we thought it was going to provide an answer, it's because it kept raising a question. The question wasn't what's behind that tree. The question was, why is it behind the tree? Now, maybe that sounds like a small distinction, but the more we thought about it, the bigger it became. If somebody came tomorrow and somehow proved beyond any doubt exactly what was standing there, I honestly don't know if that would satisfy our curiosity. We'd certainly want to know, but we'd suspect that we'd still be sitting here asking ourselves why it was standing there watching us in the first place. The thing that always stuck with us about that footage was how comfortable it appeared. Maybe comfortable isn't the perfect word, but it's the one we keep coming back to. It never struck us as something that had been surprised by people. It never struck us as something that had accidentally wandered into the area and suddenly found itself in a situation it didn't expect. Whether that's a fair interpretation or not, the impression we left with was that whatever was there seemed perfectly content to remain where it was and observe what was happening around it. Definitely didn't really have any fear of us. That's where our thoughts started drifting toward the witness reports that we'd read over the years. Not because the reports were identical, but because they weren't. But because we kept noticing a similar thread running through them. A lot of people don't begin their stories with the sighting itself. They begin with a feeling that something wasn't quite right. They talk about becoming aware of their surroundings in a way that's difficult to explain. They talk about feeling like they weren't alone long before they ever saw anything that would justify that feeling. Some of them eventually report seeing a figure. Some hear sounds. Some find tracks. Some never get anything more than an uneasy sense that something was nearby. And what we found interesting was that the people often seem to remember that part of the experience just as clearly as the sighting itself, sometimes more clearly. If you've ever interviewed witnesses for anything, you know that people tend to focus on the things that affected them the most or the most personally. That's true whether you're talking about a criminal investigation, a traffic accident, a hunting story, or a strange experience in the woods. People remember the moments that leave an impression on them. And over the years, I've heard enough witnesses talk about the feelings of being watched that we eventually stopped treating it like background noise and started paying closer attention to it. That's probably the point where this episode really started taking shape. We weren't looking at individual sightings anymore. We weren't trying to decide whether one witness is more credible than another or whether one report was stronger than the next. We just found ourselves wondering why the same kinds of experiences seem to show up so often. Not in exactly the same way, because that's not how real life works, but often enough that we couldn't quite dismiss it. The more we look back to the old notes and old reports, the more we realize that we'd spent years focusing on the visual side of encounters while giving much less attention to the interaction itself. And when we say interaction, we don't necessarily mean communication. We mean the strange relationship that seems to exist in a lot of these encounters where one side appears aware of the other long before the other side realizes what's happening. The more we thought about that, the more it started changing the way we looked at reports we'd already read. Because once we started paying attention to the aspect of the encounter, we began noticing it in places where we probably would have skimmed right past it before.
When you and I first shot that video down at Joe Ball's, we didn't see a thing. In fact, it was what, over a year later before we, somebody pointed it out while we showed it on a podcast that there was something moving behind that tree. And you were always been the skeptic of the group, but how was your opinion of that footage that we captured changed after you had the experiences you did on Combs Ferry?
Oh, it definitely made it more real to me. When we initially saw the picture, and it was like a year, 18 months later, whatever it was. The perception I had was, I never got the perception anything was there. The place just sounded weird from the beginning. Joe Ball just has that creepy, uncanny valley kind of thing going on with it. It's like somebody tried to create a campground based on how somebody described a campground, but they'd never seen a tree. It wasn't quite right. But then when we had the Combs Ferry stuff going on, I mean, that was very tangible. I saw prints, I saw weird carcasses that I couldn't explain. It started throwing rocks, and it seemed to change its behavior as things went on. I mean, it got more aggressive. And so I definitely found myself in that situation thinking, okay, I'm less concerned about what this is, but what is it going to do now? Why is it doing what it's doing, and what's next? It definitely upped the pucker factor for me personally anyway.
Robbie, do you think researchers sometimes spend way too much time trying to identify what they're looking at, but not enough time asking why was it doing what it was doing?
I think some do, yeah, for sure. Because, and this as well as I do, sometimes if you're deep into an investigation, you've got to back out and ask somebody else, hey, look at these notes, look at these case notes. What am I missing? Because that whole forest for the trees thing, you can micro focus on one thing too much and miss the bigger picture sometimes. And I think I don't think that's necessarily anybody's fault. I think it's just the way people are. That like it was said in the opening. Sometimes people remember what affects them, what speaks to them. It's the same way with investigation. If there's a certain thing that stands out, sometimes you tend to get laser focused on that and miss some of the other things.
I definitely agree with that, Doc. So the feeling of being watched, do you think that's something people should take more seriously than they do, or do you think that's just a normal reaction that people have being alone out in the woods?
No, I think it's definitely we still have that innate survival instinct, the little lizard brain, or where you turn into a knuckle dragging caveman, and the thing of we've all heard, and I've heard, and I've felt, and I've experienced myself. You feel kind of unnerved, it's like you get that, like we call it the spidey sense, right? Because that spidey sense starts tingling, the hair stands up on the back of your neck. Man, that's your own survival instinct saying, hey, there's something out here that's watching you. Now, could it be that you're just creeping yourself out? Yeah, sure, you could psych yourself out, absolutely. But when you get that super duper oppressive, just like when me and Robbie were at LBL and we were there right there in that graveyard at cemetery, and all of a sudden all the bugs stopped bugging and all the frogs stopped frogging, and I tell you what, that it got heavy. It was almost like the pressure dropped, and we felt it. It was palpable. So yeah, that's a big thing. Pay attention to that, man. That's your primal self going, hey, you might want to consider exiting.
Exactly. I've got this question's for all three of you, because you're going to come at it from different perspectives and different backgrounds. Robbie from the man tracker, you and Steve from a biology background. If a creature or a person wanted to remain undetected in the woods, what kind of behaviors would you expect to see based on psychology or known animal behavior?
When y'all want to go first, or you want me to? What?
Go ahead, man. You're the tracking expert.
Well, I mean, from a person standpoint, you know, the big thing is noise discipline. You know, if you're trying to remain hidden, you're going to try to not make any unnecessary sounds that you can help.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if somebody knows what they're doing, breaking up your silhouette, because Doc, you and DA both know this from the military. That's why they teach you to, you know, to camo your face to break up that outline, because we were trained to see things that don't match. So you break up your outline, and that's all, you know, camouflage is meant to break up your outline. So things like that are obvious. Two of the most obvious things that people are going to do if they're trying to remain hidden. I mean, you know, we do it in the law enforcement and military community all the time. People who are trying to avoid said law enforcement and military do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as an animal goes, you know, predators follow the same. If they're out hunting for food, they don't make a whole lot of noise. I mean, that's why those villagers in India wear masks on the back of their head, because tigers sneak up behind them and they can't hear them because their feet are designed to walk quietly. So, I mean, they had to get inventive and be really creative to keep from getting it, as Doc likes to say.
Yeah.
So, really, there's not a whole lot of difference in the way an animal or a human wants to go undetected. It's just, it's natural for an animal. We have to work at it.
Yeah.
Or at least we have to work at it now. You know,
Yeah.
I've got two thoughts on this myself. Now, bear in mind, I was never in the military. I'm the oddball of the group here, and
But you were an Eagle Scout, so your woodcraft skills are not in question.
Well, that's true. Spent a lot of time in the woods, but I'm not a hunter. I got no philosophical problem with hunting. I'm just too lazy. You know, food becomes a shortage. Bambi's on the menu, and so are all our friends. But speaking as a human, if I was trying to stay secret from something else, you know, a human or a non-human something, I'd have to do two things. First of all, I would have to observe it to figure out what its capabilities are. You know, what can it perceive? How good are its senses, you know? And then after that, I pretend I'm a cockroach and I would hide in the cracks. You know, I come out the light, I'd get squished. And, you know, that critter behind the tree there, I think was still in phase one. I think it was kind of drawn to us being a little different. You know, maybe the weird sensory input from, you know, the diabetic peeing on his tree or whatever. But it was sitting there trying to figure out, okay, what can these two idiots do? And then let's go in the shadows. At least that's my thought.
Doc, what do you think?
Something they're really good at is staying uphill, upwind, and out of sight, and keeping the sun at their backs. That's just like a natural thing for them. Maybe not so much for us, but you know, they know how to hide their scent. I mean, that's a big thing with people too, because if y'all recall back during Vietnam, you know, they could smell the that fermented fish sauce that they put on everything, and they said they could actually smell it. And so what they started doing, Americans smell different to them, so they started eating that stuff too. God bless them for that, because I don't know if I could do it, you know. But that's like what Robbie was saying, you know, concealment. That's a way of concealing yourself or camouflaging yourself. You can not only camouflage your appearance, but camouflaging your scent is another behavior that I don't think that we think about, because animals do that.
Well, the reason I asked that question was kind of set up for this. So when we're looking at Bigfoot behavior, like how a tree peaks and how it will use the foliage to its advantage and approach from outside the light, do things like cover its eyes so it doesn't pick up the eyeshine. What do you think that behavior leans more toward? Toward humanoid or toward animal?
Could it be a combo of both? I don't know.
It's certainly far more intelligent than you would expect of a black bear or even a mountain lion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to say it points to something intelligent.
It certainly gives credence to the intelligence of the creature.
Yeah.
So, looking back at some of our previous episodes, like Joe Bald and talking about the Denali and the investigations in the Smokies and the Bone Pile and things like that, what patterns have you guys noticed? What dots are we connecting that we think that what dots are we connecting that some people don't even think belong together?
I think terrain's a big one. That
the zone theory. Yeah. I think that makes an incredible amount of sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've really shown terrain plays a big part in a lot of these sightings, and not only that, but like Doc kind of hinted on earlier, staying upwind and all that, they also tend to stay uphill.
Mm-hmm.
And we've shown that on multiple occasions in sightings and encounters that we've read. So, I think that's some important dots that need to be connected.
Yeah, it's almost like they think tactically. You know what I mean? They want to have the tactical advantage. That superiority. Because if I'm in a place where I know there's potential danger, I want to be able to observe all of it, and we're better to do that is, at an elevated position.
But answer me this: how tactically sound is a pack of wolves? I mean,
right.
you could make that argument that wolves think tactically, especially when they're hunting.
Absolutely.
Lions,
they'll do a pincher on something. They'll surround them. They'll flank them out. That's their intent.
Into an ambush.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we've discussed those types of encounters, like that one guy that was on the trail and they were trying to funnel him to a choke point. You know what I mean? So
it's like we always say, look in nature. We get a lot of these answers.
Absolutely.
Look, so it's not hard or much of a stretch to think that an intelligent species like that can think tactically, and we call it tactically, but it could
right.
be survivability. It could just be
survival.
Yeah. But that's how we would classify it as, they're thinking tactically, because that's how we think about it, because we logically look at things like that. But to them, it's just okay. This is what I need to do to survive. It's just generation after generation of it, being ingrained in their cerebral cortex.
So here's another one. This is for all three of you. If you were to start teaching somebody who had never investigated Bigfoot at all, they wanted to either go with you or wanted pointers on what they needed to do. Say they're going out for their very first time and know next to nothing about Bigfoot. What would you tell them to watch more for? The behaviors, or descriptions, or the physical evidence?
I'd definitely go for behavior.
Oh.
The behavior will allow you to predict the others.
I mean, the behavior is basically everything out there except our senses, other than seeing. What you feel, what you smell, what you hear. So.
Yeah. Well, behavior keeps you alive too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I really, maybe I'm just a coward to the group here, but if I was to run across one of these critters, I would like to know real quick whether I was on the menu or I was just looking for berries and nuts. We can form a relationship if berries and nuts are involved, but if it's my berries and nuts, we're not going to be friends.
Yeah.
There's probably berries and nuts and long pig.
Right. Exactly.
Robbie, you got anything else you want to throw in there?
I mean, I agree with Doc and Steve. I mean, if you were just talking to somebody about they were just wanting to go out and talk to somebody, then obviously 6 1 half dozen other. If they're just talking to people, but going out into the woods and something like that, then 100% behavior, because you may not see what it is that's out there watching you or stalking you or whatever, but you can still observe the behaviors. And, so you may not be able to see what it looks like. So focusing on that might not save your life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're focusing on the behavior and what it's doing, and it's not hard to tell when animals start showing aggressive behavior. I mean, every animal that I know of has certain threat displays. When it's getting ready to, whether it be dogs pinning their ears back to their head, cats doing the same thing, or, cats with the swish in the tail, dogs and other canines baring their teeth, gorillas with their, slamming sticks on the ground, beating their fists on the ground. There's threat displays and everything. Sharks bowing their backs and poking their pectoral fins out. I mean, it's stuff like that is stuff that you need to know if you're going to be out in the wilderness. Maybe not in the wilderness worrying about sharks, but hey, Saturday Night Live said land shark was a thing. So who am I to disagree?
But you're right, Robbie. I mean, you may an inexperienced person may miss a footprint. They may miss any kind of other physical evidence. But if you're like, hey, listen for wood knocks or loud popping sounds or howls and hoots and things like that, that's something anybody, no matter how how much of a rookie you are, can pick up on that.
Like, how many times have we told people, if you're going into an area, get online or go get a book or something like that and find out what animals are in the area that you're going to be in. Get yourself familiar with what sounds they make and what they do, because if you hear something that doesn't sound like that,
absolutely.
Well, it's like when at Moon Valley, when Doc did that owl call, he specifically did an owl call that wasn't from here.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, Doc, why don't you take us into segment 2?
I'll be happy to. So, going into segment 2, this one is we'll call this one the Watchers, and one of the things that has surprised all of us once we had started looking into all these reports was how often witnesses seem to just spend more time talking about awareness than they did about the actual sighting. So it's something we hadn't really focused on before, and like most people, we usually focus on the visual part of the encounter, what we see. And that's the part that always gets repeated. And that's what ends up in books and your documentaries, your conference presentations. People want to see the pictures of large hairy figures that's crossing the road or standing in a tree line, walking through a field or disappearing in the woods. That's what people carry away from that story. But when you go back and read about the full encounter that was had, sometimes the sighting itself is only a few seconds. Everything else, the buildup, takes much longer. And so we started noticing that in report after report, a witness would spend several paragraphs talking about how uncomfortable they felt. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Before anything happens.
Like Moon Valley, a lot of stuff happened before we ever saw him.
Absolutely. Just like when you go into the LBL, you can feel it. It's a feeling. And sometimes, they describe the woods becoming really quiet. Sometimes they talk about hearing movement that never quite revealed itself. Me and Robbie encountered that night there in the LBL. Sometimes they'd simply say they couldn't shake that feeling that something was nearby. Now, to be fair, none of these things automatically mean anything. And anybody who's spent enough time outdoors or has experienced, weirdness where the woods, felt different. And I mean, I've had those moments myself. I know that DA and Robbie and Steve also have. And most of the time, there's a perfectly normal explanation. A deer moving through the brush, a coyote circling downwind, a bear coming to see if it wants to do anything with you, and just slipping away quietly. Nature is full of things that happens just outside your field of view, but you might hear it. But what caught our attention wasn't the feeling itself. It was how often witnesses connected that feeling to an encounter afterward. And that's a little bit different, because now you're talking about people who walked away from the experience convinced that whatever they eventually saw or heard or tracked had been aware of them long before they became aware of it. Kind of like we talk about with mountain lions. If you see it, it's seen you for a long time. And it's letting you see it, type of thing. So the more we thought about that, the more we talked about it, the more we found ourselves going back through these other cases and asking questions that we hadn't paid much attention to before. What if that part of the story matters more than we think it does? And we remember reading a report a few years ago where the witness had said that the sighting itself only lasted a matter of seconds, but what stayed with him for decades was the half hour before it happened, because he talked about feeling uneasy and checking the woods around him, constantly looking over his shoulder, excuse me, and never really understanding why until he finally saw something move. So it kind of cemented his feelings. And so whether his interpretation was correct or not almost misses the point, because what struck us was how often we had heard variations of that same exact experience from completely different people in completely different regions of the United States. And once we started noticing that, we found it was difficult not to pay attention to it, because the reason is simple. If somebody tells me that they saw something unusual in the woods, we all can think of a dozen reasons they might be mistaken. Distance affects perception, lighting affects perception, fear affects perception, memory affects perception. None of that is controversial. That's real facts. Anybody who's worked investigations understands that eyewitness testimony has its limitations, but behavior is a little bit different. And not because behavior can't be understood, it can, but because behavior tends to leave patterns behind. And that's what we had talked about and find ourselves talking about, and not one report, not 10 reports, the pattern itself. Because if enough people are describing encounters where they felt observed before they ever laid eyes on anything, eventually you have to decide whether that's just a coincidence or whether it's telling you something about nature of the encounter itself. I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know. I don't think these cats up here do, but I'm sure we all wish we did, because the question that kept calling us back and pulling us back reminded us of something we talked about on the show many times before. And one of the reasons tracking can be so frustrating is that animals don't always behave the way we expect them to. The more intelligent the animal, the more dangerous it becomes to assume you know what it's going to do next. Anybody who's hunted long enough learns that lesson eventually, and anybody who's tracked predators learns it. Anybody who spent time around an exceptionally intelligent animals learns it. And you stop asking what would you do, you start asking what would they do. And the more we looked at those reports, the more we found ourselves wondering if that's exactly where a lot of people get stuck. Maybe we're all looking at these encounters from the wrong side. Maybe we're spending too much time thinking about what we'd see if we encountered something unusual, that we're not spending enough time thinking about what the creature might be doing during the encounter itself. Because if there's really something out there that has managed to avoid clear documentation for this long, then understanding how it behaves may ultimately be the most important aspect rather than understanding what it looks like. And that thought has led us into another rabbit hole entirely, because once we started thinking about all this observation behavior, we found ourselves going back to some of the discussions we've had for years about the concealment, the visibility, and the strange tendencies these creatures seem to have for being incredibly difficult to see, even when people are actively looking at them. So what do y'all think about that? Why do you think that so many witnesses, this is a question for all y'all, remember the lead up to an encounter as vividly as the encounter itself?
Well, look at the night we spent in Combs Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
That encounter was mostly, like auditory and dealing with things you were seeing out of the corner of your eye. It wasn't until the very end we were actually starting to see movement and things like that in the woods around us. Mm-hmm. Most of that was, stuff in the trees, hearing noises, Noah hearing what sounded like language on the parabolic mic. A lot of that was just the feelings we were getting from the area. And that's really the part about Combs Ferry that sticks with me more than what happened as we were pulling out on the boat when we were standing in the water with our guns drawn. So I honestly think that it's the feelings you get and the things you observe that stick with you just as much, if not more. I mean, I could say even in critical incidents when I was in law enforcement, all the feelings are what come to mind more readily than the moments of the fight or things like that. It's the feelings you experience and the way you process the information.
Yeah, it's the visceral emotion. I mean, because it wasn't it wasn't until right at the very end that y'all saw eyeshine, wasn't it?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
they were getting
As we were
close.
pulling off,
Yeah.
as the boat pulling off, getting people, we started seeing eyeshine.
Yeah.
So they
You know-
didn't become visible until they wanted to become visible.
Right.
Yeah. The thing with the encounters is, we're pretty visual organisms. We tend to kind of focus on our vision, even though it's not that great compared to a lot of other animals.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it they say, Doc, about people who are dying or in comas? Isn't hearing the last sense that they lose?
That's what
So they always
I've
thought.
always heard.
So I think that the hearing, I think, registers a little closer to the lizard brain, as you were talking about earlier. I think that stuff hits us deeper, because there is an evolutionary benefit to it. If you're dealing with an animal with better senses than you, more power than you, whatever, I'm not talking about Bigfoot. I'm talking about like just any kind of wild animal. Being able to know sooner that it's there gives you an evolutionary advantage than wait until it just shows itself. When it steps out, like the big bad wolf and shows its teeth. I'm not grandma. By then it's too late. You're wolf poop. Realistically, you just don't realize it yet.
Wyatt said it was the Missouri tree trout for him. Yeah. That's something that sticks with you. I mean, because when you look at that, you realize that thing wasn't there by accident. It wasn't put there by a bird. That whatever put that there had to use hands, and clearly that fish had not been cut apart; it had been torn apart.
Right. Yeah, and we didn't have much internet signal there, but none of us had to chat GPT whether Missouri had flying fish or not.
Exactly.
We all put it together. We're like, something wrong here.
And there was still some weirdness when we went back, when you weren't able to go with us, Steve. There was still some weirdness up in the freaking trees. We're like, what is this?
Well, the factor for me was the disarticulated deer. I think that's the exact moment when I was, screw you, Robbie.
That's about
because that was I could feel the gears like come apart when my paradigm shifted.
We all heard it shift. We heard the
oh yeah, it's like going into reverse at 50 miles an hour. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that one was about 12 feet up.
It was up there a minute.
No,
So,
that one wasn't that far up because remember Doc held his water bottle up, to take a picture of it.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was about 6 or 7 feet. Well, it was above my head.
I thought
So,
what was that? What
6 or
was way
7
up in that tree at Joe Bald? That was way up there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
our deer was only about 8 foot up, I would think, something like that. I could reach it with difficulty from standing.
What would each of you boys say was the defining moment when this all came together for you in the woods? Because I know each of us have had a moment where, it no longer was an academic question.
Well, I mean, for me, I believed from the time I had my encounter when I was a kid, but
Yeah, you had an encounter very young.
Yeah.
but still, for years you think, especially when you go years and nothing really happens, you always got the thought in the back of your mind, well, was I imagining it like everybody's trying to tell me I was? But then the story I told you about when we were up in Jocassee, and me and my uncle stopped and waited, let my dad and my son go on, and we stopped and waited just to see if because Dad was hearing the chatter in front of him, and there were no other cars in the parking lot when we got there. So him and Kevin walked on. Me and Uncle Scott stopped, and something was up above throwing those big chestnuts, water chestnuts or whatever. It was throwing those down at us. So it was at that point where I was like, yeah, there's something to this.
Mm. Thermal don't lie.
I think that was
I was
Doc's
going to
moment.
say
Yep.
that, I didn't even see Doc's moment, but hearing the story at the Bent Penny after the fact, that was definitely that was your clutch burning moment, I think, Doc.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's and like all y'all. I mean, and a lot of people here. I never didn't believe it. You know what I mean? Because I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, and Robbie, you've never even had one, have you?
Nope.
Yeah. And so it's not that Robbie doesn't believe that occurs. He's just never experienced one. And I was in that same boat on the flip side of the coin, you know, and that was a eye opener, son. Eye opener.
Yep.
See, I
Steve,
imagine.
when was your defining moment? I think I have an idea, but
Oh, mine. Oh, I've already discussed it. It was seeing the. It was not so much seeing the deer in the tree, but me putting together the biology of it, and me thinking, okay, I've dissected a lot of things over the years, and I've helped my cousins who hunt, butcher things, and I butchered cattle and whatnot. I'm looking at, okay, I can see there's part of a deer here. I can see it's missing some pieces. I can see that the pieces that are missing weren't cut off, and they were, manually disarticulated. And then I immediately started running the force numbers, and I was like, oh, that's something big. That's something real big. And then, as I'm, smelling the gears cooking off, I finally thought to myself, this is going to be big. This is going to be really big. And why is it in a tree? It's like it all kind of hit together, and then the whole stupidity of the situation hit. I'm like, it's in a 2-inch tree. Why is it in a 2-inch tree? What puts half a deer that's been wrenched apart in a 2-inch tree? It ain't climbing the tree. It's like it's like the more I observed, the more questions I got, the more my mind was racing, trying to figure out what I was even seeing, what was the significance about it. I grew up in the woods, and I don't fear anything out there camping, but that is some weird crap, and the tree trout was the icing on the cake, to be honest with you. It was almost, I know the thing had been there. Clearly it wasn't placed while we were there, but it was almost like it was deliberately trying to let us know that it was there, and it wasn't an ordinary critter. And it's like, okay, well, the short buzz guy is processing something's wrong, but he's still not putting it together. Okay, fish head. For the remedial boy in the bunch, here's your fish head in the tree. And I definitely felt, I don't say outgunned, but I felt outmaneuvered by whatever it was. I definitely got the perception. I knew it was bigger than I was, and I wasn't quite sure that it wasn't smarter than I was. And that was
more than one
scary to
believer
me.
that night. Lieutenant Jenkins looked at me and goes, well, I've learned something tonight. What's that? He goes, I wasn't carrying enough gun. And now the guy owns a Smith & Wesson 500 Magnum and a Desert Eagle 50.
Well, he and I had a similar talk on the dock, when you guys brought back my crippled self. He's like, what were you carrying? I said, Glock 17. And he goes, 9mm. That wasn't a wise choice, son. And I said, I was armed for a coyote and meth head. I could easily take a coyote or a couple of them or a meth head. I wasn't packing for Bigfoot or whatever the hell was hanging stuff in the tree. Remember, I'm the agnostic, and everything you pack in, you got to pack out. And so, and of course, I mean, the biggest thing I've got is a 5.56 or a 12 gauge. I'm not carrying some of this 458 and stuff that you guys have. It was a realization that I did not have enough firepower for sure. But then I really didn't want to commit to using firepower. I don't want to kill a critter that's minding its
firepower
own
in one of
critter
those
business.
situations is one of those things like a parachute. You hope to God you don't have to use it, kind of like a med kit. You hope to God you ain't got to use it. But if you do have to, you better have one.
Well, right. I mean, I was, I packed to be a medic because your doc couldn't make it that trip. And so I was the closest thing to doc y'all had. I wanted to have enough firepower that I could keep from getting ate by a coyote or something, badger or something that I know lives in the woods of Missouri. Thankfully, I was relying on the rest of y'all to have enough firepower to keep it off of me.
We'd at least made it spicy. Dorothy, that's exactly what we're asking, because that's not animal behavior. There's no other animals that will put animal parts in a tree as a warning, and that's what we believe it was. We believe we crossed the territorial boundary when we crossed that point, because it was after that when things started getting violent. Guitar Dude says, I've seen half a deer in a tree about 15 feet off the ground. We got out of there fast after seeing that. We heard whooping calls. You might have found something's larder.
Yeah.
We got about 3 minutes until we have to take our first break. So I'm going to ask another quick question to all three of you boys, and then we'll jump into our commercial break. So why do you guys think that so many reports involve creatures that seem to be hard to observe? Because if you see a bear in the wild, unless the bear is stalking you, it doesn't make any attempt to hide. Deer are good at standing still, but as soon as they move, you see them. They're not going to peek at you around a tree. Why do you think so many of these reports involve such a level of intelligence from these things that they make themselves as difficult to observe as possible?
Well, if we want to go down the rabbit hole and say these are, relic hominids, they're relics. You get the definition of relics. The relics because all the rest are gone. They came here first, and all the rest are gone. It's common belief in what's the word I'm looking for in like in archaeology, anthropology, that the Neanderthals and the Australopithecines and stuff like that came first, and then the Homo sapiens, the Cro-Magnons and whatnot, out intelligenced them, and outbred them, and as a result, they went into extinction, or if we follow our hypothesis here, near extinction. They had to learn to be smart, and human smart or near human smart, to still be here with the humans. The ones that didn't pick up the program quick enough are worm food and fossils.
Doc, what do you think?
Well, to me, it's along those lines. They're relics because they're like the hide and seek champions of the world. You know what I mean? They're very cunning. Okay, they didn't live this long by not being smart. Exactly what I'm getting at. They, to them, we see them as a threat. Yeah, but and I'm spitballing here. They may see us as big a threat to them as they are to us, and so it's equal parts, caution on them going, hey, I don't want to mess with this dude. I just want to see what he's doing. If he's going to mess with me, or I'm going to have to mess with him. I don't know. That's me.
Bobby?
I mean, there's not really much more I could add to what these two just said. I mean, I tend to fall more along the lines of what Doc said, but I think it's just a cautionary thing. It's an intelligent animal. It knows that we can harm it, and it's that cost versus or risk versus reward.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to have to go ahead for the commercial break, but Robbie, when we come back, we'll have you start out with segment 3. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a fun conversation so far, and I think we've laid out a pretty good foundation for where we've headed tonight. We've asked a lot more questions than we've answered. What's that?
You might want to take section 3 if you read the way
right.
It just. Right. Okay. I think it would go better coming from you.
All right, we can do that. But tonight we've asked a lot more questions than we've answered. And honestly, I'm perfectly okay with that because that's usually where the best discussions come from. We're about to step away for a couple minutes and pay a few bills because, unfortunately, microphones, cameras, and streaming services don't run on good intentions. While we're gone, grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, a cold beer, something cold to drink, maybe a snack, and don't go anywhere because when we come back, we're going to take everything we've talked about so far and start asking where it goes. We've spent this first hour talking about behavior. We've talked about observation, concealment, communication, and why some of these reports keep pointing back toward the same questions. So when we come back, I want to spend some time looking at what science has learned about our extinct relatives over the last few decades and ask whether any of those discoveries line up with the behaviors we've been talking about tonight. Now, we're not going to say they do, and we're not going to say they don't. We're just asking a question. That's what this show has always been about. So stick around, and we will be right back after these messages, folks. And we appreciate you guys sticking around with us.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month, and we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026, join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man. From the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the Dead Rise, the Ragnarok Rising Saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts.
Folks, we are back, and we're going to jump right back into this. You know, one of the things that really messed with my head was that goat video. Robbie sent it to me the first time, and I remember watching it and thinking he had to be pulling my leg. It started off staring at this cliff face, and I don't really see a thing. Then I noticed a goat. Once I saw it, I couldn't really believe that I'd missed it in the first place. But then somebody takes a shot and misses, and the area explodes with movement. Pretty soon, I realized there are goats all over the place. Somehow my brain had completely failed to register them. The funny thing is that even after you know when they're there, they're still hard to keep track of. You look away for a second, and your attention drifts somewhere else, and suddenly you're hunting for them all over again. And I'm going to take a second and just show you guys this video. But some of you guys who have been with us for a while have already seen this, but I'm going to show you this video. And this is what we like to call adaptive camouflage. So watch closely. Did you see that? You might have saw a couple of them, and then you see that puff of smoke where somebody took a shot and it missed, and suddenly there's probably 30 of them in that frame. They didn't teleport in. Scotty didn't beam them in. They didn't decloak. They didn't, pop in from the next dimension. They were there the entire time. It's just how adaptive camouflage works. And now that you've watched that, you can follow us along. I got to thinking about that video after we started talking about witnesses feeling being watched, because it reminded me of something I've heard for years in Bigfoot reports. People talk about creatures just disappearing, not leaving, not running, not walking away, just disappearing. And every time I heard that, I found myself wondering what the witness actually experienced in that moment. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've lost track of deer, coyotes, foxes, turkeys, and about every other animal you could imagine. Sometimes they're moving, and sometimes they're standing still. Then sometimes they're a lot closer than you ever thought they would be. Then they take a step, and suddenly you realize they were there the whole time. That doesn't mean the animal vanished, it didn't turn invisible, it just means you lost it. There's a big difference, and the older I get, the more I appreciate just how easy it is to lose visual contact with something in the woods. I think a lot of us carry around the idea that a large animal should be obvious. It sounds reasonable until you spend enough time outdoors. Then you start realizing how much of what we see depends on movement. A lot of the time, we're not spotting an animal because we can clearly see it. We're spotting it because it moved. It turned its head, it flicked an ear, shifted its weight, or did something, but it caught our attention. Once that movement stops, things get a whole lot more interesting. And that's probably one of the reasons that the Paul Freeman footage keeps moving through the scene. And that's understandable. It's the most obvious thing in the footage. But what I found myself paying attention to lately is how difficult it can be to track visually once your eyes lose it. And again, I'm going to show this footage. Not because it's a great example of cloaking or a Bigfoot walking through a portal, because it's a perfect example of adaptive camouflage.
Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
Yeah. That's not because he turned invisible. That's not because Scotty beamed him up. He didn't enter another dimension. He didn't turn into a mouse and skitter away. He stopped moving and blended into his surroundings. Animals do that. You saw that with the doll sheep. You've seen that with talking about every deer hunter's ever said, I didn't see that deer until it moved. Because that's the way adaptive camouflage works. It stopped moving and blended into its surroundings. It didn't do anything magical. It didn't do anything special. It just did what creatures that are adapted to that environment do. It blended in. And that's where my brain really started making connections. Not conclusions, but connections. Because if a goat can blend into a cliff face, and a deer can disappear in terrain you've been staring at for 10 minutes, and a turkey can vanish in the woods that look too open to hide anything, then maybe we shouldn't be so quick to assume something impossible happened every time a witness loses the sight of a creature. It doesn't explain every report, and I'm not saying that it does. What it does make me wonder is how much of the mystery comes from the creature and how much comes from the way we process the information. The reason I keep circling back to that question is because we've spent a lot of years talking about Bigfoot as though visibility is the default setting. We assume that if something is 8 feet tall, we should be able to see it. And if it's standing nearby, we should notice it. If it moves through an area, we should be able to follow it. But what if that's the wrong assumption? What if we're talking about a species that spent generations learning how to avoid detection? Not because it's magical, not because it's supernatural, just because staying hidden keeps you alive. The more I thought about that, the more I started looking back at encounters we'd discussed over the years. Instead of asking why witnesses lost sight of something, I found myself wondering how the creature managed to stay hidden for as long as it did before the witness ever saw it in the first place. Because if somebody sees a figure for 3 seconds and loses it, maybe the more interesting question isn't what happened during those 3 seconds. Maybe the more interesting question is what happened during the 30 minutes before that. And once I started thinking about that out of that way, I found myself drifting into another subject we've discussed quite a bit over the years: communication. Because if witnesses are accurately describing some of the sounds they hear before the encounters, then maybe those sounds have something to tell us about what was happening before the sighting ever even took place. Boys, what was your first reaction when you saw that mountain goat video, the doll sheep?
Well, I was like, adaptive camouflage. There it is. There's the example.
It's a perfect example of adaptive camouflage.
Which is why as soon as I got done seeing it, I sent it to y'all. There you go.
Yeah.
Boys, what
An
do you
entire
what
herd
about
of sheep
you guys?
out there. The only all he saw was one.
Yep. So, have you guys ever lost sight of an animal in the woods?
All the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Did it
I lose people
turn
in the mall.
invisible? Did Scotty beam it up? What happened?
Usually, like you said, it stopped moving.
Because it blended into its surroundings.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Grant was actually talking about us in Jurassic Park instead of the T-Rex. Visual acuity is based on movement.
Yeah, for real.
So, really, how much wildlife observation depends on movement rather than visibility?
I would say a very high percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know every deer I've ever got deer hunting, I only saw it because it moved.
Exactly. I've had them not even 30 yards from my stand, standing right down below me. And I had scanned one way and then all of a sudden, poof, it didn't come through a portal. It just moved.
I remember waiting almost until the end of the day one time, waiting for something, and I kept seeing this little spike buck. And I'm like, no, go get your big brother and come back. Well, it was getting close to the end of the day, and it was almost the end of deer season. I'm like, no, screw it. I'm going to get this little spike so at least I get something. No sooner had I shot him, more than a dozen other deer popped up out of the long grass and scattered. One of them was an 8-point buck.
Oh, man.
I was mad, but I got the spike.
Crazy, man.
So do you think witnesses are describing a creature that disappears, or are they just losing visual contact?
You know what I think.
You know what I think?
They're just losing track of it.
I'm going to show the Paul Freeman footage one time.
Yeah.
And Doc, you and Steve are the biologists of the group. I know what Robbie and I think about this. We've talked about this video many, many times. But I want to show this video again, and I want you to it's not going to mute the mic, so you guys can talk over the video. I want your analysis of what's going on. Even though Paul Freeman's moving the camera, we still know where it was and where it went. So I'll let you guys analyze this video. Robbie and I will shut up and let you guys talk.
Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
I'm not quite sure why he disappeared the second time. It looked like he was in front of the trees, but he still disappeared.
We
He
think it's those
blended.
clear air shafts.
He blended right in. Yeah, I mean, because when he was black, he was black. When he hit something that was green, it was green. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Blended in perfectly.
it's very
Again,
interesting.
we think it's those clear air shafts.
Well, didn't Dr. Meldrum find some of those, or
He
was
sure
it?
did. So did Doug Highcheck from Monster Quest.
Yeah, and then I don't know, did MK Davis, did he ever have
MK
some?
Davis has also talked about clear air shafts.
I thought so. Yeah, so that's not just us talking about it. These are guys that are way more educated in this stuff than we are, and they're talking about it. So the fact that
But
I
from a
think so.
biological standpoint, what do you guys think of that?
It definitely does not move like a human. It doesn't have
And the blending ability. What do you guys think of that? Do you think the clear hair shaft is the most logical explanation for that?
Well, absolutely.
it's-
You know, I mean, you don't need anything metaphysical for that to happen.
I could certainly see how somebody that had no idea about any of this saw that thing stop in front of those trees and thought it cloaked. I can understand why somebody would look at that and think
Sure.
it just cloaked.
Yeah. I mean, but that's, to me, I like Occam's razor, you know what I mean? And so I want to sit there and just say, it's a lot easier for me to say it's adaptive camouflage because of clear hair shafts versus a chemical reaction in his body, which caused a chameleon-like response or something like that, or the other one where it just poof disappears. That's I think the simplest explanation, man.
Yeah. Well, we've already discussed before, Doc, you know, the amount of metabolic energy it would take for it to actually open up some kind of a portal. You know, you're talking about reality breaking energy. And even the chromatophore stuff, like the squid do, you know, that's a huge amount of metabolic energy on their part.
Absolutely, man.
And, they can get away with it because, they're a squishy critter who's arguably considered pretty simple, though I would argue they're more intelligent than we give them credit for.
True. I'd agree. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And the way when it stops, you can actually see, because on the very last portion of the video, it looked like the Hulk, right? It looked green.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it certainly turned green.
But why
It's
did
like
it
there's a
look
color shift.
right? Why did it look green? Well, what was its surrounding environment?
It's green.
Also
And
green.
clear hair shafts like that are just like the fiber optic cables they're putting in modern ghillie suits because they absorb and redirect the color of the light around them, enhancing their ability to blend in.
It worked. I mean, it's science, man. I mean, it's a scientific fact. It's not conjecture. Because we try to debunk things with scientifically every time, when we see something. Robbie and I, even that night, we were bouncing back and forth, dude, at LBL constantly.
Yeah. Could be this. Could be this. Could be this.
Yeah.
Could be this.
We weren't immediately, circling it with a red marker. You know what I mean? You see it. So.
And folks, again, I want to state for the record, we are not trying to convince you that this is the 100% truth. We're trying to provide a plausible hypothesis for why people are seeing some of the things we're saying. We can't say with 100% certainty that this is what it is. We're offering this as an explanation for you to look at, to observe, to listen to, or listen to our points and decide for yourselves. Because at the end of the day, there are no experts in this field, no matter what anybody else wants to try it. Tell you.
No. Yeah, and
Robbie, you want to go ahead and jump us into segment 4?
Offering
Sure. So every now and then we'll get asked questions, like where some of these ideas came from. But the truth is, it's not something that, DA Doc or I being writers, it's not something we dreamed up while we were behind the keyboard or something Steve saw in the ER that we all talk about. It doesn't really come from that. Most of them start because something happened to one of us years ago, or recently when we've been together, and we form our hypothesis based on that. And a good example of that is DA's tongue pop. He grew up on a farm and he would hear things that he would mimic, birds, whatever, and he kept hearing this popping sound, and he kept, practicing and practicing, practicing, and got to where he can, as a witness standing in Gatlinburg Convention Center, I saw him do that and stop about 150 people, kind of like when me and you were in LBL, Doc. Everything just went quiet because everybody just stopped and turned and looked at DA. So, it comes from things like that DA had growing up on a farm. Me growing up on a farm and having my encounter, the encounters Doc's had paranormal wise. Steve's always been kind of like, I want to know if it's real or not, but I just need the proof. So it comes from vastly different areas of background that we just sit around and talk about these things, and these hypotheses just kind of start forming.
Mm-hmm.
So, lost place. Like I said, DA grew up on a farm, and I grew up on a farm. Steve, I don't think grew up on a farm. And Doc, you kind of grew up
time on a farm,
more like a Delta area, right?
Yeah. No, it's South Mississippi. I grew up on a cattle farm.
Okay, well, maybe they're not vastly different, but any one of us have had experiences in our lives that at the time we may not have, like we're talking about, we looked at it differently when it happened, but now that we kind of start hey, I had this happen. Well, I had something kind of like that happen. Doc grew up in Mississippi. I grew up in South Carolina. DA and Steve grew up in Missouri, or DA grew up in Missouri and New Mexico. So some of these things happened identically to us, but vastly different areas of the country. So when we sit around and talk about these things, sometimes it takes us months before we finally come to the conclusion and realize it, because, we talk about it, and finally it'll hit. And, just like going back to DA's tongue pop example, he talked about it and he thought about it and he thought about it, and all of a sudden it clicked in his head when me and him were having a conversation about, well, what if this is echolocation? That's where these things have started forming. It also got us thinking about how much noise has something to do with, or, if DA can make that noise at his size, what can something, 2 or 3 times his size do? So, and, that just where he said he never really checked, his childhood memory was different. It was like, oh, this is just a sound that some animal's making. But as we started talking about it and the theory started growing, we're like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. So we started reading into reports, and people were, some people were even saying it sounded like mouth clicking, or some people even used tongue pops. And, pieces started falling together. And we've all spent a lot of time in the woods, and most of the sticks we picked up don't hold together very long. So there's another piece of that puzzle. And I've said it to DA and Doc and even Steve many times, I don't think Bigfoot's walking around in the woods with a Louisville Slugger on his shoulder. So it just, like DA said, we're not saying this is 100% what it is, but we're offering something that is a plausible explanation to what these possibly could be. Are some of them wood on wood? Probably. Are some of them rock on rock? Because when DA and I were at, was it Smiddle Cave, where I picked up those rocks down at the river and started clacking them together? Yeah. Some of them could be that way? Yeah. But is it 100% Bigfoot walking around with a Louisville Slugger in his hand all the time? I don't think so. So, but there again, maybe that is what's happening, but maybe it's not. We honestly don't know.
No.
But what we do know, what we do know is that once that question got into our heads, when we started talking about it, we started listening to witness reports a little differently, and instead of just automatically, it was a wood knot. We've started referring to them as, well, could be a wood knot, could be a tongue pop. So we started asking ourselves whether witnesses actually saw wood on wood, or whether they just simply heard a sharp, loud report that was echoing through the trees. Most of the time, they never saw the source.
Sounds with that.
Yeah, but most of the time, they never saw anything. They just heard a sound, and they described it the best they could. And we've talked about that before. When you go to describe something that you've never heard before, you're going to automatically go to something that is familiar to you, and the sound of that makes, that's just the first natural reaction that somebody, it sounds like somebody hitting a big stick against a tree, and it does sound like that. So it's just kind of I guess there'd be a technical term for that, auditory docs. They would, like when you're trying to describe something that's never something you've never heard before, and you're saying, oh, it sounded like this, and that's not maybe actually what it is, but I know there's probably a technical term for it, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, that's an auditory it's just
almost like an auditory pareidolia. It's like you're trying to give it.
Your brain tries to find a pattern to compare it to.
You got it.
That would be the perfect example, or perfect way to describe it, Steve. Thank you.
Dr. Sharp, as far as volume goes, you can ask any one of these guys. If I do it down at Table Rock Lake, you can hear it echoing across the lake, and that's not a small lake. When I did it in Moon Valley, it was echoing for miles up and down the valley. I can make multiple different types of tones, from the like that, which is more of a bass, to the, depending on how you hold your mouth. You can make different noises, and I'm just a dude that taught himself how to do it. If these things are using this for echolocation and they're subterranean like we think, then that is going to help them navigate in the darkness.
So the question that we kept asking amongst ourselves was, well, what are they actually hearing? And the reason we ask that question is because if you decide automatically what it is before you really know, then that's what it's going to be. And you kind of shut yourself out for any other possibilities. If you're like, you heard it and you just say, oh, it was a wood knot and it was wood on wood, and that in your brain clicks into that, then you're going to be sold on that. So, but that same thought led us to another discussion a few years ago. We started kicking around the idea of the underground habitat. And all these came around about the same time. So if these creatures spend any amount of time in caves, abandoned mines, or natural tunnel systems, then sharp impulse sound suddenly becomes a lot more interesting because echoes carry information. So we tossed around the possibilities that these sounds could serve more than one purpose. Maybe they're communication, maybe they're used for orientation, maybe they're both. But there's a video and I brought this up to DA. There's a video of a guy, and I think it was Stan Lee's show that he did called Superhumans or something like that. Guy was blind from birth, if I'm remembering correctly, and he taught himself how to echolocate through clicks and pops that he made with his mouth. And they set up an obstacle course on him and had him ride this obstacle course on his bicycle, and he navigated that course and never hit anything by echolocating. So if we can teach ourselves to do that, there we go again. Not too far of a stretch for the imagination to believe. So, but maybe we're completely off base. Who knows? Because like we always say, this is our best guess. None of us are experts. But what we've learned more over the years by asking a question and never having or pretended to already know the answers. So we're going to ask the questions. We're going to discuss it. We're not going to ever pretend that we know the 100% right answer. And that's why we always have these conversations with each other and with y'all. Because sometimes we end up changing our minds, and we've done that many times.
hmm
You know, we've started a theory, and one of us has been like, well, I think this, and it, kind of leads that way, and then somebody will find something, and it'll end up turning us all in a completely different direction than we started. Either way, it's a whole lot more interesting than pretending the mystery is already solved. And conversations like that is exactly how some of our best theories were born.
You guys
So-
think of the first time you heard the Sierra sounds?
Me personally, I think I have more questions than answers to tell the truth there.
I've heard it many times before, but I'd never really heard it really clear and really isolated until I went to that Georgia Bigfoot Museum, and they got the headphones that you can put on. If anybody is in that area and wants to, I recommend going to that place. I sent y'all pictures. That it's a really interesting place, and there's a couple of our theories that are hanging up on the walls down there. Not that we're getting credit for them, but they're there. But putting those headphones on and listening to those sounds for the first time, of not just hearing it like, out on speakers like this, where there's all kinds of ambient noise in the background. When that's what you're hearing is those sounds, it is a whole different experience.
Well, they had a Navy cryptolinguist and analyzed those with a computer. And he said that there are peaks and valleys in those recordings that are both above and below what a human vocal range is capable of producing. So clearly, whatever they recorded isn't human, because we couldn't make those noises. We couldn't match them. The cryptolinguist also said that while the computer recognized the sounds as a type of language, it had no idea what they were saying.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
Because of the repeated syntax and things like that, it recognized that this is a type of language. We just couldn't tell you what it is. So this is for those of you out there listening as well. Have you guys ever heard a sound out in the woods you couldn't identify, even after thinking about it for years? I know I have. I've heard lots of sounds I couldn't identify. If you're ever spending time in the Ozarks woods at night, you're going to hear stuff you can't identify.
It's kind of like being back in a woolly swamp.
What is it we say about cryptozoology? A cryptid is nothing else but an unknown organism, or one that hasn't been known yet.
Right.
Badgers are cryptid until you see what a badger looks like.
Yeah. So there's another question for you. This is for those of you who are listening. I'd love to hear every one of you guys chime in if you've got an opinion on it. Do you think the tongue pop theory makes practical sense, or are we overlooking something obvious here? I mean, that is something I've taught myself to do as a child, and I've been able to do it since I was about 4. I used to, spend hours out in the field behind the house listening to the sounds made by birds and coyotes and bobcats and everything, and I got pretty good at mimicking most of those sounds. But that popping sound I would hear in the evening coming from the woods behind the house, behind the farm, always confused me. I didn't know what it was. I tried that like that. It sounded similar, but you couldn't make it very loud. Then I tried that, you tap on your throat, try to make that pop. That didn't work. And it wasn't until I started putting my tongue against the roof of my mouth and and inhaling as I pulled my tongue back, pulling that back, I started producing a similar noise. And it took a while before I could get any volume out of it. But as these guys can tell you, you get me out in the woods and you're going to hear that for a good long distance.
It's loud. Very loud. Like across.
I won't do it as loud as I can on here because it'll probably mess my mic up. Certainly overload it.
Well, like I said, it got the attention of the whole convention hall.
Yeah, it did. As Bill says, I just did it, not loud. It takes practice. You can do it. But once you start being able to do it loud, try it. I did it at our cabin in Gatlinburg. And that night, we had something slap the side of the cabin and left a 19-inch track outside the cabin. We've showed that on the show lots of times, and now Annette has forbidden me from ever making that noise again when we go stay in a cabin.
Well, the problem is you know the words, but you don't know the language. So you know
Right.
you could have been offering yourself up as some kind of a romantic partner or something.
I hope not. Arlen says, I live in the Midlands of South Carolina, but I was hunting near where Robbie lives. I've heard the sound he played, meaning the roar.
Ugh. That one.
Steve, have you ever heard us play that roar?
Oh yeah. Yeah, remember Cora about had a fit over here. She immediately stopped and like all her hackles went up, and she's like, trying to figure out what it was because she didn't recognize the sound either. That and she's a bloody coward, but that's beside the point.
Like Harley. He's a big chicken.
Seriously. You hear her growl. She sounds like she'll tear you apart. If you've got a snack, she'll love on you. Otherwise, she'll run from you.
Exactly, Lone Queen. That's why they think the Sierra sounds might be Bigfoot language, because they'd seen what they believed were Bigfoot creatures in the area, and then that night they recorded it as they surrounded their camp. And yeah, they absolutely above and below what human voice range is capable of producing. Kevin Bode says, I'm not convinced on wood knocking due to nobody ever finding damaged trees. I'm convinced tongue pops. Yeah, I'm with you there. I've been in areas where I heard lots of what they call wood knocks, and never once have I found a damaged tree where something was smacking it.
Nope.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It would take a bit of damage making
the bark
noise.
at the very least.
I mean, I found a bunch of rubs, but that's when I'm looking for deer, because you can find rubs on the trees and scrapes on the ground, everything like that. But yeah, that ain't from a log or a branch hitting the tree.
Right.
Yeah, or a bear scratching their back on a tree.
Right.
Yeah. Steve, you want to jump us into segment 5?
I sure can.
And this is a perfect segment because I really want to get you and Doc's opinions on this. I know we've talked about it before, but I really want to throw this in tonight.
Well, as y'all know, we've had a lot of talks, off camera about other stuff. We're 4 idiots who like to discuss this stuff. And one of the things that started catching our attention years ago wasn't a particular sighting. It was a detail showing up in the sightings after sightings. And when you read enough witness reports, you eventually get to the point where you stop asking whether it's a coincidence and you start wondering if there's something there worth thinking about. For us, that detail was the eyeshine. It doesn't show up in every report, and we wouldn't expect it to. And a lot of encounters happen during the day. And even then, all the nighttime encounters don't always involve lights or conditions where you'd expect to see it. But it showed up often enough that you found yourself kind of paying a little more attention to it every time we ran across it, especially when the witness described it before they described anything else. Now, the obvious response is that eyeshine isn't unusual. That's absolutely true. Anyone who spent much time outdoors after dark has seen it. We've all driven down a back road and caught a pair of deer standing in a field. We've seen raccoons, coyotes, foxes, somebody's dog looking back at us and their eyes reflecting the light. But that's just part of being outside at night. But the fact that a witness reports eyeshine doesn't automatically make me think they're looking at something unusual. But what it does make me wonder is what they're actually describing. If somebody reports seeing eyeshine and then goes on to describe a creature they couldn't identify, my mind naturally starts asking questions, not because we're trying to prove anything, but because we're trying to understand what the detail might tell us if the witness is accurately describing what they experienced. That's when we started thinking about the tapetum lucidum. We know humans don't have it, but we know a lot of mammals and reptiles do, and the reason's pretty straightforward. It helps them make better use of available light, which gives them an obvious advantage when they're moving around after dark. Got me wondering whether we're looking at another possible adaptation of these reports are describing a real animal. And the more we thought about it, the more it connected with conversation we've already had on the show. We've talked quite a bit over the years about the possibility that these creatures spend more time underground than most people realize. We're not talking about anything exotic. We're talking about caves, mines, lava tubes, natural tunnel systems that exist all over North America, especially here in the Midwest. If something was using these environments on a regular basis, then an exceptional low light vision wouldn't seem that unusual at all. In fact, you almost expect it. I mean, think about the fish that live in the caves around here in Missouri that are completely blind. That's an adaptation. Don't need the eyes, so why waste the metabolic energy for it, right? So does that mean that every report of eyeshine supports this idea? Of course not. There's too many variables. There's too many known animals that can produce eyeshine for anybody to make that leap. What it does mean is every time I run into another report mentioning it, I find myself asking the same question all over again. Is this another piece of the puzzle, or is this just another coincidence? We really don't know. What we do know is that when we step back and look at everything we've talked about tonight, we keep noticing the same pattern. We've talked about observation. We've talked about concealment. We've talked about communication. Now we're talking about vision, and none of those ideas really stand on their own. They all seem to fit together as possible adaptations would make sense if we're talking about a highly intelligent animal that's managed to avoid people for a very long time. It doesn't make the theory right. It just makes us think it's worth asking the question. Now, maybe where we've landed more than anything else over the years is at this point. Every time we think we figured something out, another report comes along and makes us rethink it. Sometimes it strengthens an idea. Sometimes it tears one apart. Scientific method here. You test your hypothesis, and when the evidence doesn't support it, you form a new hypothesis. Either way, we'd rather keep asking questions and get so attached to a theory that we stop listening to new information. That's one of the things we've always enjoyed about doing this show, because every now and then somebody in the audience will send us a report, or one of us miscreants here will bring up something we never thought about before. Suddenly we're all looking at the same mystery from a completely different angle. And to us, that's a whole lot more interesting than pretending we've already got the answers. I mean, like we said, there's no experts in this field, and we're all in this together.
Yep, 100%.
Well, one thing I want to point out about Denisovians and Neanderthal is the more you read about Neanderthal, especially if you read the book Them and Us by Danny Vendramini. The book's called Them and Us, How Neanderthal Predation Helped Shape Modern Man. Fantastic book if you haven't read it. But if you look at the ocular cavities of Neanderthal skulls, they're larger than ours. And I believe that's because they were largely nocturnal, and we know for a fact that both Denisovians and Neanderthals lived in caves. Now, as modern humans, Homo sapiens became more prevalent and learned tool usage and started expanding their territory, it makes absolutely logical sense to me that Denisovians or Neanderthal would go below ground.
When you're talking about the Neanderthals having the bigger eye cavities, it got me thinking of some of those like nocturnal primates, like the lemurs and stuff like that. You look at them; they all look cracked out all the time because of those big old eyes compared to us.
What's the other one? Well, the tarsiers, the sugar gliders. They have
sugar gliders, yeah.
Big old eyes, yeah.
Marmosets, and
that's
proportionally. You got a little critter that fits in the palm of your hand, and it's got eyes the size of a cat, and all eyeballs.
So here's a question for you boys. Especially you two that are coming from the biology background, but Robbie's got a naturalist background. He understands animals. For an animal, let's say an animal that is not largely nocturnal and or spends a great deal of time underground, like we believe, how much sense would it make for it to have a thicker layer of tapetum lucidum?
Was it the military adage? The more you operate at night, the better night vision you need. I would think it would make perfect sense. I found myself on YouTube going down these rabbit holes, and I don't know how I get started on them sometimes, but I started recently watching a channel called Nerd History, and they'll take a like a modern military unit and put, let's say, 500 Marines against Genghis Khan's army or whatever. And one that I was watching the other day that caught my attention was 500 modern Marines. Could they still live the Vietnam War? And so basically they put these 500 modern Marines in modern kit in, Vietnam 1968. And they were talking about where the technological advantage they had, but then they also, and what caught my attention more than anything else, is by the end of the thing, they still lost the war because the North Vietnamese just simply adapted to that new tech, and so yeah, they got these better dogs. Awesome. That works for about a month, and then the batteries die, and then the NVA figures out you got them, and they start operating the day, and it's all adaptation. It's adaptation to the nth degree, and I mean, these critters got to be doing this. You've assuming that they actually exist. I'm always the agnostic of the group here. If they are still existing when all the rest of them are extinct, they've adapted. Something they're doing, something that they've turned into, gives them an advantage over their brethren who are now fossils. And if you live in a cave, you either get better eyes or you get better location without eyes, or both.
You cut out DA. I think he asked you if you had anything to add.
No, I didn't hear you ask a question. No, I agree. And the fact that also this is where also the echolocation stuff comes into play is one. Okay, cool. If they're underground, if they've got sunlight, that tapetum lucidum won't let them see. It's just like if you have absolutely zero light, your night vision ain't gonna work unless you have an infrared illuminator. But if these dudes are underground and then all of a sudden they lose any ambient light that helps their tapetum lucidum work better so they can see better in the dark, what other method of navigation do they go to then? The whole echolocation we had talked about.
And I postulate that once they get a certain level of depth in the caves, that's when you start seeing bioluminescence cropping up. That's when you'll get glowing fungus. You'll get glowing mosses, things like that.
Yeah, be pretty cool.
Thank you, Chicken Bird. Appreciate you. Congratulations to everybody that won. And Chicken Bird, thank you again for giving those away. That awesome. Reminds me, it's a new month. I can do that too. I'm gonna give away some. I'm gonna give away 10 channel memberships here over the next few minutes. But let's see. Doc, you want to take us into segment 6?
Sure enough. So the last tribe, and after putting the episode together and thinking about, we had talked about things that happened over the last 40 years in our lives, and something that finally, we talked about, it should have hit us a long time ago, is that people say, hey, why do you lean, towards this relic hominid idea? The honest answer is, when we talked about it, it's not really a conscious decision. It wasn't as though we said, hey, that's what Bigfoot's got to be. It's basically happened gradually, because the more reports we've read on this stuff, the more field work that we've gone out and done, and the more conversations we've had on the show, the more that we're asking the same questions over and over again. And the funny thing is like, we weren't really looking for an answer. We were just looking for something that behaved the way people kept describing. And so every time we'd read other reports or hear other interviews, we paid less attention to how tall it was or what color his hair, and started paying a lot more attention to what it did. How did it move? How did it react to people? Did it avoid confrontation? It seemed curious. All these things, did it seem to understand what the witness was doing? And those were reports that even after we had closed the book, it just stuck with us. And so we started thinking along the way, hey, this behavior was changing the questions we ask. And instead of asking, what does it look like? We said, hey, what does it behave like? And so it's definitely not the same question, and they definitely lead you down different roads. And so we looked at reports, and then the less interested that we were always like, well, that's fine. We can't find the perfect photograph because when we know we're not. And the more interested we became in finding patterns. There's these recurring patterns. That's what we talk about as science. It's repeatable, right? So it's a scientific evidence there. And so that's what got us talking more about Neanderthals and Heidelbergensis and the other archaic human species I wasn't looking, Robbie and DA, we weren't looking for anything that matched a witness description. We were looking for behaviors. And so every now and then we'd run across something that made us stop for a minute because we had a conversation on a show or an encounter report I'd read years before. It wasn't enough to convince us of anything, but it was enough to keep us reading. And so every time, over the last few years, that's why it stayed with us. We've reached points where we said, hey, let's just talk about another witness report. And then we hear another witness report saying that describes the behavior, the not what they saw, but everything leading up to it. And sometimes it's the way the creature avoids being seen. Sometimes it's the way the witnesses describe that feeling of being watched. It's that vocalization that doesn't quite fit. And so none of these things stand on their own, but together, what does that form? It's repeatable, it's observable, and it's something that makes us even more curious over a longer time. Now, I don't think we've solved the mystery, not even close. But if anything has been taught to any of us, and I know this because, man, it was a big shift for me. It's that certainty is usually a mistake. And so we cannot sit there and say, well, that's definitely it. Because there's too many unknowns, too many variables, contradictory reports, too many honest people describing experiences that don't necessarily fit together. And so that's why we've always tried to remind there aren't any true experts. You've heard us say it here several times tonight. There's no true experts in Bigfoot. There's people with a lot of experience. There's people who spent decades in the field. Thousands of reports have been read by these folks, but experience isn't the same thing as having all the answers. And maybe we're on the right track or maybe we're wrong, but we'd honestly be more comfortable with that without a possibility, because I'd rather, and I know these guys we'd rather change our minds 10 times while we're chasing the truth out there, than instead of spending the next 20 years defending one singular idea that doesn't hold up. And so that's what is really going on here. This isn't an attempt to convince anyone that Bigfoot is a relic hominid. It's an opportunity just to simply walk us through a path of thought, a pattern of thought that's taken a few years, and why we keep coming back to these same questions. And so, even after the show, you may hear all this and decide that, maybe we're headed in the wrong direction. And if that's where y'all land, let us know. That's perfectly fine. My hope isn't, and I know our hope isn't that you agree with us. It's just the next time you read a witness report, you maybe pick up on a detail that you didn't pick up on before, or maybe even think about asking a question. Maybe a question pops in your head that had never occurred to you before this episode tonight. So, and if that happens, cool, man. Then I would say this has been a worthwhile episode.
Well, we get a lot of information from y'all. We are just four idiots who are passionate on the subject and aren't afraid to ask questions. And I can't speak for the other guys necessarily, but I have no self-respect. I don't care what people think of my opinions. These are just the opinions that I can come up with. I'm probably wrong about 90% of it. I learn more from my mistakes than I do learn from the things where I'm right. Something that comes to mind, we started at the beginning of the broadcast talking about the Joe Bald photo, and I was scratching my head trying to figure out why that critter was hanging around behind that tree. And friend of the channel made the observation, it's like, okay, well, presumably this is a dog man. And okay, what do dogs do? Like, I don't know. He goes, well, they mark their territory, right? Like, yeah. He goes, didn't you say you peed on that tree? I'm like, what? And he goes, you marked your territory and asserted your dominance on that tree. And, this was trying to see if the competitor was worth his time. Thankfully, he weighed me up and he decided I wasn't worth his effort. But, it took somebody who had a little more knowledge of canon behavior to point that out, to make it make sense. Is it the right answer? I don't know. It's better than the answer I had. And so we're going with it, or I'm going with it. We may find that this show ages like fine milk. A year from now, we may, be retracting all of this and sound like a couple idiots. But, a year from now, we might find other channels and other people, looking into some of the same stuff. I mean, we're starting to gain some traction with our cave theory. I don't know if we necessarily invented it, but we definitely spoke pretty publicly about it. And it's kind of cool when some of the greater community is like, these guys might have an idea here,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps us learn about it. I just want the answers. Like I said before, I'm the agnostic of the group. I don't want to have to see a dead Bigfoot body to believe in Bigfoot, nor do I want to become Bigfoot poop to believe in Bigfoot. The moment of clarity right before death doesn't do me any good. But hopefully we'll get some answers eventually.
Out of all the behaviors we've discussed tonight, which one sticks out the most for you guys?
Which
I
behavior?
think the echolocation makes the most sense to me, truthfully, because to build upon that whole idea of the living underground. Assuming they're human-like, you put any of the four of us underground with no flashlight, we're going to be struggling. We're going to be relying on every opportunity we have. I wear trifocals and I don't hear with a crap. So, you'll find me dead at the back of the cave. Come get me. That adaptation makes sense.
For me, I think it's the intelligent way it observes, because it does so in a way that's, well, it's different from other predators. Yeah, your mountain lion will stalk you, wolves will stalk you, but these things take a very intelligent approach. Not only are they careful about how they approach and whether or not they're seen, but they're also very, very subtle about how much of themselves they expose at the same time. I think this is one of the greatest arguments for high level of intelligence.
Well, things probably have not ended well for members of their species when they ran out of the woods waving their hands and said, "Hey, I'm here. I want to meet you."
Well, let's just look at human behavior over the last few thousand years. Whenever encountering even other groups of people, we haven't always behaved the best.
Right. Well, it's like that. I think they call it the zoo hypothesis when it comes to potentially meeting aliens. The reason that we haven't seen them is because they're advanced enough to take a look at us and go, "Yeah, you're an oddity. It's kind of fun to watch you, but no."
I think if aliens are capable of traveling across vast interstellar distances, they probably roll their windows up and lock the doors when they drive past our planet. We're a combination of deep southern Arkansas or East St. Louis to the rest of the universe. They're like, nope, you're either going to wind up on a slab, your vehicle's going to be up on blocks, or somebody's going to try to stick you in a gumbo.
Yeah. We're gonna steal your spaceship for the catalytic converter, and or try to mate with your pets. That's where we're at.
So, which behavior do you think really deserves more attention from other researchers? Which of the theories we put forward?
I don't know, man. They're all good. I mean, I wish we had. I mean, there is some evidence. There's clear air shafts out there. I'd like to see more research done into the eyeshine to see if it's if it's the same. If it's the same across the board, or are there different species out there that have different colors and things like? I mean, I don't know. A lot of variables again.
Well, I'm like any other Gnostic in the field. I want a body, but I don't want to be a body that I happen to shoot. Right. I would love to find. I would like to find one that died of natural causes, so I could do a necropsy on it before the Smithsonian or whoever, the Men in Black, get a hold of it. I want to look at the eyes. I want to get a piece of the pelt. I want to see if its organs are laid out like we are.
Yeah,
I would. Right. I
hate to interrupt you, but it is time we got to pause for a commercial.
Yeah, gotta
Folks,
pay the
we've
bills.
covered a lot of ground tonight, and I don't know about you guys, but I enjoy these kind of conversations because they remind me just how much there is still to learn. We've kicked around a lot of ideas over the last couple hours, and I hope one thing has come across clearly. We're not trying to convince anybody that we've solved this mystery. If anything, we've probably come up with twice as many questions as we had when we started, and I honestly think that's a good thing. So we're going to step away for just a few minutes and pay the bills, but when we come back, I want to spend the rest of the evening doing what we usually do best. We've laid out our thoughts on the table, and we've talked about the things that we've shaped the way we looked at this subject. Now I'd like to open things up a little bit more and see where this conversation takes us, because that's usually when somebody brings up an idea that nobody else in the room's considered. So grab another cup of coffee, stretch your legs, and don't go too far, because we still got plenty to talk about, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man. From the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the dead rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month. And we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026. Join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
folks, we are back. We're going to jump right straight back into this. So I'm going to start in with segment 7, which we call the missing pieces. You know, after spending all this time putting this episode together, I kept coming back to one thought, and it's probably the same thought that's kept me interested in this subject for the last 40 years. The more I learn, the more I realize I still don't know, and honestly, I think that's probably a healthier place to be than pretending I've already got all the answers. One of the questions that comes up every single time is the subject that discussed is, where are the fossils? And I think that's a fair question, and it's one that deserves to be asked if we're talking about real flesh and blood animals. And that's exactly the kind of evidence we'd all like to have. And I'd love for somebody to uncover a skeleton tomorrow that could be studied by every anthropologist and biologist on the planet, because we'd answer a whole lot of questions in a very short amount of time. But at the same time, I've always thought it was important to keep one fact in the back of our minds. Less than 0.1% of all animals who ever lived become fossils. That means the overwhelming majority of life on this planet disappears without leaving that kind of evidence behind. That certainly doesn't prove Bigfoot exists, and it doesn't excuse the lack of fossils. But I don't think the absence of fossils automatically ends the conversation either, because fossilization is an extremely rare event. The same thing goes for DNA. People ask all the time, and they should. Ask about the DNA all the time, and they should. DNA is one of the most powerful tools we've got, but it's also one of the easiest things to misunderstand, because contamination happens, degradation happens, and extraordinary claims still require extraordinary evidence. Every time somebody announces they've solved the mystery, I find myself waiting to see whether the evidence survived careful examination, because that's exactly what good science is supposed to do. Kind of like that old boy that claimed he had a Bigfoot body, and as soon as the as soon as biologists got a look at it, they're like, this is a stuffed animal encased in ice, which, you know, is the way a lot of this goes. Then there are the witness reports themselves, and I think this is where most people end up talking past each other. Some reports are almost certainly mistakes. Some are probably hoaxes, and some are impossible to evaluate because there's simply not enough information, and some are detailed enough that they stay with you for years. The mistake, at least in my opinion, is treating all of them exactly the same, because they're not the same. Every report deserves to be looked at on its own merits, and sometimes the honest answer is, I don't know what happened here. And that's never really bothered me. In fact, the older I get, the more comfortable I am saying those 4 words, because they leave room to learn something new tomorrow that I didn't know today. I don't think curiosity and skepticism are enemies. I think they belong together, and if you lose either one of them, you're probably headed in the wrong direction. And that's one of the reasons we've always said there are no experts in this field. There are people with tremendous amounts of experience, and there are people who've dedicated a good part of their lives to studying the subject, but experience isn't the same thing as certainty. Every one of us is working with incomplete information, and every one of us should be willing to change our minds when better evidence comes along. Maybe everything we've talked about tonight is pointing us in the right direction, but maybe it isn't. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll laugh at half the ideas we've talked about tonight because somebody discovered something none of us saw coming. If that happens, I'll be the first one to say we got it wrong, because getting closer to the truth has always been more important to me than defending a theory. That's really why we do this show. We're not trying to tell you what to believe. We're just sharing the questions that keep us thinking, the observations that have caught our attention, and the reasons we've ended up looking at this mystery the way we do. And if you walk away tonight agreeing with every word we said, that's completely fine. If you walk away disagreeing with us completely, that's fine too. What I hope more than anything is that the next time you read an encounter report or hear somebody tell their story, you'll listen just a little differently and maybe notice something that never caught your attention before. If we've managed to do that, then I'd say we spent our evening pretty well. Robbie, you want to take us right into the next segment?
So where do we go from here? And if there's one thing that we've learned over the years, it's that this subject has a way of humbling you. Just about the time you think you've got something figured out, you read another report, you hear another witness, or have another experience in the field that makes you stop and rethink something you were pretty comfortable with the week before. We literally have just said that in about 2 or 3 different ways. we used to think it was frustrating, but these days we've kind of come at that from a different angle. And instead of it being frustrating, it's actually one of the things that we enjoy most about it. It's because it means there's something left to discover. And you know, DA will know this because I was always told this when I first got in law enforcement. The first day you think you know everything is the day you need to retire because that's when you're going to get hurt. And it's kind of the same thing here. If you think you know everything about this field, then that's when you're about to mess up. When we first started the Nightmare Hunters podcast, we were doing what just about everybody does when they get interested when they get interested in Bigfoot. We look at footprints, photographs, videos, eyewitness counts, and there's really nothing wrong with that because those things are very important. But somewhere along the way, you know, we kind of became less interested in the moment of the encounter and more interested in everything that happened before and everything that happened afterwards because it's easy to lose sight of those two things. It's easy, like we said, to get laser focused on, you know, what did it look like? How big was it? What color was it? It's easy to get focused in on those things. It's easy to lose sight of those important things of, well, was there any feeling you had before? What happened afterwards? Because those things are very important in this field. And we started paying closer attention to behavior because it has a way of repeating itself. And I think if anybody's watched the show for the past couple months, you've seen that we've been going down that road and trying to highlight that. Even when the witnesses have never met each other and been separated by hundreds or even thousands of miles, the story is roughly the same. And that's really what it's been about. Not trying to convince anybody that Bigfoot is this or that we're simply sharing questions that have stayed with us over the years and why they continue to pull us back towards the same handful of ideas. We may be completely off base with this, and you know, y'all tell us if you think we are, because like DA said, that's completely fine, because that's what this is an open discussion. So we're not going to lose any sleep over that, because if somebody comes up tomorrow with better evidence that points us in a different direction, that's the direction we're going to be taking, and we're going to be excited to take it. So the thing that's important to all of us is that's the whole point of the research, is finding these answers out. It's like Steve said earlier. He wants the answers, you know, and Doc wants the answers. I want the answers. Everybody out there listening wants the answers. And it's about how you go about getting those answers, though, and about not being laser focused on one small specific way of getting those answers. So one thing that we hope changes over the next several years is the way we approach this subject. We'd love to see more researchers spending time comparing notes instead of defending camps. You know, we've said that many times. We'd love to see more people asking questions before they start arguing over answers that they probably don't even have yet. There's good people in this field doing solid work, and there are people coming at it from completely different backgrounds. Some are hunters, some are biologists, some are law enforcement officers, some are trackers, some are just ordinary folks who have had experience they can't explain, and they want an answer for it. Every one of those perspectives has something to contribute if we're willing to listen, and that's the big issue. There's not been a lot of people willing to listen in this field. We'd also like to see people spend more time looking for patterns instead of just chasing the latest headline. Every time a blurry video shows up on the internet, it dominates the conversation for a few weeks, then it disappears. Meanwhile, there are thousands of witness reports, sightings and files all over the country that probably have more to teach if we just slow down long enough to compare them. Not one spectacular piece of evidence that changes everything overnight, but in dozens of small observations that can keep pointing us in the same direction until a larger picture finally starts coming into focus. Maybe that's exactly what we've been doing tonight without even realizing it. We've talked about observation, we've talked about concealment, we've talked about communication, talked about vision, and we've talked about behavior. None of those subjects answer the mysterious question or the mysterious question by itself, but together they do paint a bigger picture, and that's interesting enough that it's worth the time to continue the conversation. Whether that picture ultimately leads us towards a relic hominid or somewhere completely different, we nobody knows. We don't know. Nobody does. But what we do know is that after nearly 40 years of each of us doing it, so was that 160 combined years at least, uh, that we're all still interested in looking at the next report. We're all still waiting for the next bit of evidence to come out. And we hope we never lose that, because if we lose that, then there's no sense in doing it anymore. Because the day we stop being curious is probably the day that we're going to cease being any kind of functional source of entertainment or whatever to any of you out there. As long as we're curious about it and we're putting the effort in, then we're here for y'all's entertainment. But if we're just going through the motions, then what are we doing it for? So listen to the people that you disagree with, because every now and then they might point out something that you've overlooked. And don't be afraid to change your mind if the evidence takes you somewhere new. At the end of the day, none of us owns this mystery. We're all just trying to understand a little better than we did yesterday. And I think that's a pretty good reason to keep having conversations like this. What do y'all think?
What is it that you'd like to say, DA, that life's a journey we take together? I was starting to say before we went on the commercial break, I would love to have definitive proof there's Bigfoot. I don't want it to be, something I shot, but if I find a nice body someplace that has died of natural causes, be damn sure that I'm going to be doing a necropsy. I'm going to be calling Doc up. We're going to be taking that thing apart, trying to understand as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Your words there, Robbie, stuck with me as something I like to tell my students when I used to teach at the nursing school. I would tell them, they call it nursing practice, because you're always striving to get better. The day you think you know everything, you're unsafe to practice, and I don't want to work with you. And I think it works in this field as well. When there aren't any questions left to be answered, what's the point? I mean, yep, I'm sure it probably helps to have as a content creator, it helps to have the views, it helps to push the books and everything. But in the bigger picture of things, if we have all the answers, what good are we doing?
Rodney wants to know has anyone had a pleasant experience with Bigfoot or knows someone who has? I've read stories where people said that Bigfoot helped them. There was a story of a hunter who got his leg trapped under a log that fell, and one allegedly lifted the log off of him. So there's Native American stories have been trading with Bigfoot. So I wouldn't rule it out. But like any other wild animal, it's going to depend on circumstances. Whether they're a relic hominid or an upright ape, any wild animal is going to have a potentiality for dangerous interaction. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible that you can have a non-violent encounter with one. I had a nose-to-nose non-violent encounter with a grizzly bear. Does that mean I'm going to walk up to every grizzly bear I've seen and try to pet it? No, it certainly does not. I was extremely lucky. I was like, if you could see where my microphone is, the top of my microphone, I could have went and touched that bear on the nose that easily. And fortunately, Fat Guy was not on the menu that day, or I wouldn't be here having this conversation. It looked at me like, oh crap, a human, and I undoubtedly was saying, my face undoubtedly said, oh crap, a bear, and we went our separate directions. Had it had a cub with it, or it had just woken up from hibernation, or if it had been getting ready for hibernation, because this was the middle of the summer, if it'd been really hungry, guaranteed, chubby long pig would have been on the menu.
He would not be worried about his cholesterol at that moment.
That's right. I would have been Wagyu human.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, Hillary says, DA, do not pet that dog. Nope, I didn't intend to get that close to that one. Rounded a bend in a trail, and there it was.
I did that with a moose in Rocky Mountain National Park. And it was right after my relatives had lectured me about how dangerous moose are during rutting season. I came around the corner and saw a cow. Oh, yeah, I saw a cow, and I was maybe 15 feet away. And the first thought in my mind was, how fast can my fat booty get up a tree? Second thought was, does she have any calves? Thankfully, she didn't. But it was definitely a high pucker factor experience for me. And I wasn't worried about her eating me.
It's just about any wild animal can make you have that kind of reaction. I mean, I've walked up on a coyote unarmed and thought, why is this thing out during the day? And then it started growling at me, and I'm like, I'm about to get bit by a stinking coyote that's probably got rabies because it's out during the day. So it doesn't have to be a big animal to be dangerous to you. Same thing with raccoons. If you see a raccoon out during the day, stay the heck away from it. Because it is not normal for them to be out during the day. There's something wrong with it if it's out during the day. They may be cute, fluffy, but I've seen them practically kill coon dogs.
Oh yeah,
they'll do a number on a person.
Yep, we do a lot of rabies prophylactic treatments in the ER, and they always say you don't need to worry about dogs or cats in Missouri. You're worried about your raccoons, your skunks, and your bats.
Yep. Yeah, I read somewhere that like a third of every bat colony is rabid, which is insane.
Yeah, and I do not want to get those shots.
No, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, sir.
It's not the 4 rabies shots that's the problem. It's all the dang immunoglobulin they have to inject around the wound. When they're injecting 20, 30 cc's of stuff into you, I mean, that's a shot glass worth of vaccine put under your skin. That crap hurts.
Yeah. But if you guys could challenge any one assumption in this field, what would you challenge? I'm not talking something backed up by evidence. I'm talking about something that people just assume.
Honestly, what I would challenge in the field is having to be right. Being more concerned with being the one that breaks the story than being the one that shares the story.
And if you guys remember the night that me and Robbie went live from Joe Bald, when nothing happened, we said nothing happened. We weren't out there trying to make a story based on, oh, did you hear that? Or we didn't try to make up, oh, we heard a noise, did you hear? We didn't do any of that. Nothing was going on, so we left and we went down to Plunk Road.
Okay. And then at that exact moment,
exactly. Yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to point something out and say, did you see that? When there's nothing there and we know it. And that's the one thing I enjoy about what we do here on this channel is we're not on a major network. Because if you're on television on a major network, means you've got to make ratings and you've got to keep your producers happy. And both of them are saying, you guys got to make something happen because nobody's going to watch this show if you're just walking around the woods making whooping noises, finding nothing. I mean, I don't know. Would I say that? Never mind. But we don't have a network or a channel telling us we have to produce something. So we'll find something, like when we find tracks or when we find hair, when we find anything, we share it with you guys. When we come up empty, we'll be the first ones to say we came up empty, because anybody that goes out in the woods and finds something every time, and so that's a little suspect. And I've been skunked way more often when I've ran into stuff. Going out there and it might be creepy out there, but there's not a dang thing out there. And no amount of sensationalizing it's going to change that. And some of the greatest stuff we've ever captured on camera was completely by accident. Joe Bald is the perfect example of that, because we didn't even know what we had for over a year.
Well, even Combs Ferry, I mean, the stuff we found there, none of it was fit for prime time. It wasn't like anything we discovered there was going to get us any kind of a ratings bump or our subscriber count or whatever like that. It was a couple of us scratch our heads trying to figure out what the hell we were dealing with.
And that was it. It just meant to be an initial foray to see if there's anything worth going back there and filming. Nobody was running a camera the whole time we were there, which is unfortunate because we could have got some great stuff. We got some great pictures, but nobody was shooting video, and I really want to go back and do that again. Well, folks, we've kind of covered the subject, and we're reaching the end. We're gonna wrap this part of the show off, but stick around afterwards because we're gonna talk a little bit about the books. So for those of you who are only here for the Bigfoot stuff, we're gonna wind things down. But for those of you who are interested in the books, stick around a few minutes because we're gonna be talking about those. So I don't know about you guys, but I always enjoy episodes like this because they remind me why I got interested in this in the first place. We can spend hours talking about footprints and photographs and videos and eyewitness encounters. All those things have their place, but every now and then it's good to step back and ask bigger questions. Not what are we looking at, but are we even asking the right questions? Maybe we are, maybe we're not, but the truth is we don't know. What we do know is that after nearly 40 years of researching this subject, we still find ideas that make us stop and look at the old reports a little differently than we did the last time we read them. And I hope we never lose that because I think the day you stop being curious is the day you stop learning. And if you've been with us for a while, you probably recognized a lot of familiar territory tonight. We've talked about observation before. We've talked about adaptive camouflage and tongue pops and underground habitat and the Sierra Sounds and a lot of other ideas that found their way into this conversation. And none of those episodes was trying to prove anything, and neither was this one. What we wanted to do tonight was to put those ideas on the table together and ask whether or not they might be all pointing in the same direction. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. That's for all of us to keep exploring. One thing I hope never changes about this show is our willingness to change our minds. We've said it before, and we'll keep saying it because it's true. There are experts in anthropology, primatology, genetics, ecology, tracking, and a dozen other fields that touch this subject, but there are no true experts in Bigfoot or cryptids because nobody has all the answers, and we certainly don't, nor do we claim to. What we do have is field experience. We have thousands of hours in the field, countless witness interviews, years of reading reports, and a genuine desire to understand what this mystery turns out to be. Sometimes that means a theory holds up, and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, the evidence gets the final say, and I think that's exactly the way it ought to be. Before we get out of here, though, I want to thank you all for spending your evening with us. Whether you agreed with everything we talked about tonight, disagreed with half of it, or thought we were completely off a rocker, we appreciate you being part of the conversation because that's what this community has always been about. At least it is to us. We don't expect everybody to see this mystery the same way. And honestly, I think it'd be pretty boring if we all did. But if you liked tonight's discussion, we'd really appreciate it if you'd give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you haven't already, share this episode with somebody you know who enjoys talking about this stuff as much as we do. Every one of these things helps us grow, helps more people find the show, and allows us to keep bringing you new episodes every week. As always, if you've had an encounter, experienced something you can't explain, or you've got a topic you'd like us to cover in a future episode, we'd love to hear from you. Some of our favorite shows have started because one of you took the time to send us a message. And we hope you'll keep doing that because your experiences are a big part of what makes this community what it is.
Yep.
So until next time, keep asking questions, keep an open mind, and above all, stay curious. We'll see you next week on the Nightmare Hunters. Now, boys, as we begin discussing books, it's been a hot minute since we've had Doc here. Doc, you want to give us a little update on the release of your next project?
Yeah, so Dark Frontiers, Vampire Chronicles, Book 2, Blood and Deadwood is going to be, it's in the formatting process now, so it should not be long before it is released. I'm waiting for a specific date, historically related to Deadwood, to release it. So.
Well, I have downloaded the first one, my friend, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I have been a naughty boy, and unfortunately, I am a few books behind. But I at least bought it, just like I'm buying Robbie's. I'm a couple behind in his series, too.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey,
Yeah, so
I know what it takes, man.
yeah, thank you, Roxanne. Roxanne's one of my readers. Um, um, this second book, I really got a lot more into the characters in the book, and try to make them more relatable. Very human. And so, yeah, what was it, Robbie? It was almost 500 pages, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like 71,000 words.
Yeah. So it was as DA always says, it was quite the journey. And it took me places I didn't know I was going to end up where I ended up. So that's the cool thing about it. And that's what DA and Robbie both said. Just let it take you on the ride. Sometimes just get on the train and hold on.
Well, sometimes you write the characters, and sometimes they write you. Isn't that how it goes?
And, well, and I'd always heard DA talking about Wiley, or especially like Margolin, and then because I was asking him and Robbie, I said, "Hey, have y'all ever done this?" And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the character started having his own dialogue." And I know Robbie and I had that same conversation too about did your character have dialogue and you just wrote it down without even realizing it? Yep.
Don, I have no delusions of literary greatness here. These gentlemen have a talent that I do not possess, but I can still enjoy it.
Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about when your next one's coming out?
Uh,
Give us a little update on your projects list.
I'm about somewhere close to 30,000 words and 16, 17 chapters into the follow-up Dark Frontiers War Journals. Second book is going to be called Black Sun Rising. It's just the continuation of Blood Wolves, where they're just following the trail of breadcrumbs, so to speak. Where Blood Wolves was kind of contained in that one battle in the woods of Bastogne. This one kind of opens up a little bit more breathing room. The other one was real claustrophobic, like they were stuck in one area. And this one's kind of opening up. Some more characters are showing up. Some characters that weren't in the first one that are going to be in this one. There's more Doc and Jed dialogue, and Declan shaking his head at the two idiots. Also, some tie-ins to a book or a couple of books that hadn't come out yet. So I've had people request, "Hey, you said that. What book was that in? Hadn't come out yet." That's why it was vague. So it also kind of gives a little insight into the old wild man there as to what kind of happened and set his course. So I tried to answer some questions and make you ask some more. So we're getting there on it. I don't know when it's going to be out. It's just, this month's not been really good for writing for me with everything that's been going on, but I have got a couple chapters done over the past couple of weeks, so it's getting there.
I've got 4 projects going at the same time. I've got the next Apex Predator, which is around 25,000 words. I'm hoping to have it done in the next couple of weeks. It's called Apex Predator Cursed Moon, and I'm pretty excited about that. I've got the next one of my Dark Frontiers books coming out, and it's actually going to be set before the end of the Civil War. It's going to be set while Declan was still serving. I can't remember what the working title is for that. We'll take a look real quick. That Dark Frontiers is going to be called Killing Fields of Black Hollow. And it's going to be about Declan while he was still in the military. It's something that happened to him prior to becoming the Widowmaker. He was about 16 years old when this story happens. I've got another book that's part of a new series. It's going to be called Mile Marker Mysteries, and the first book is called Red Route. And it's about a truck driver who inadvertently winds up solving mysteries. And yes, they are going to be monster mysteries. And the fourth project I've got going is one of you guys that one that I hope you guys will be excited about, because it's the next in the Hangman's Legacy series. Yeah, book 3 taking R.C. Sandoval and the crew into new mysteries. This one's called The Night Wraith of the Malpais. And I'm about 35,000 words into it, but those books are big. They're going to be around 150,000 words usually. And this one might be a touch bigger than that. But Night Wraith of the Malpais is already off and running. And yeah, like I said, I've got 4 projects going, and I hope to have all of them released over the next few months in fairly rapid succession. So I'm hoping this is a heavy year for book releases for me. So be watching the YouTube channel here. Be watching the Patreon page. Be watching on Facebook because I'll be probably announcing first on Patreon, but then they will also be seeing more releases announced on Facebook and on my blog. So be watching for those. And again, I hope to have at least between now and the end of the year, I hope to have at least 5 more books out, possibly 6. So we'll see how things go, see how we keep things moving. But if you noticed a trend, a lot of my newer books are much larger than they used to be. I used to, most of my books came out between 70 and 75,000 words on average. That was most of the Lakeview Man, the Wild Hunt books, all of those. But even the new Dark Frontiers book is going to be written like the Hangman's Legacy books. This new Dark Frontiers book probably going to be in the ballpark of 160,000 words. So these are going to be big novels, heavy action, just what you come to expect. And you will certainly be seeing a lot more from R.C. Sandoval and his crew, because I really enjoy that series. And I've got a whole new host of characters that I've created for the Mile Marker Mysteries. The main character is pretty likable guy, I think. Hasn't had the best of luck in life. His name's Harlan Mercer, and I think you guys are going to like him. And the unspoken character isn't just going to be a person; it's going to be the truck. And I think you guys are really going to dig this truck I'm building for this series. Not physically building, but I'm designing it and going to be on the covers and basically like if you've ever watched Firefly, how the ship itself is kind of a character. The Wraith is going to be the same way. Yes, the truck is named the Wraith. So I think you guys are going to enjoy that. I'm really looking forward to getting that one out and released. It's going to be another big one. So who knows where the future of the DA verse goes, because I really enjoy telling these bigger stories because it allows me more time for character development, more time for everything. So who knows, this Apex Predator might actually be closer to 100,000 words, because I've got a lot to reveal in this book. You ask the alpha readers, this new Apex Predator is gonna shake you. Because it's different and it's interesting, and I think you're really going to like where this is going. So why don't we talk a little bit about our affiliates? Doc, you want to tell us a little bit about the good folks over at Dark Angel Medical?
Why, sure. Head over to darkangelmedical.com, and we are your one-stop shop for med kits, trauma kits, first aid kits, mass casualty kits, car kits, kits for your boat, kits for your truck, kits for your fanny pack, kits for your European shoulder bag, plus the training. We do that. We do classes all over the United States. We got classes coming up and this month, next week, and so forth and so on. So check out our training site. Right now, we typically do this as coupon code is Crypto20. And right now we're doing an America 250 sale as well, since it is the 250th birthday of America. So head over to darkangelmedical.com. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out our free training on YouTube. Check out our blogs, our educational blogs. We try to educate as more than we push products. So our big thing is just always making sure that we're ready in case something bad happens, because what have we always said, boys?
Time chooses you.
That's right. So get over there, go to darkangelmedical.com and buy a couple or 6 kits or HSA, FSA eligible.
You can see if your kids are in the scouts or they go camping a lot. Yeah, definitely get a kit for your kids. Even if it's just a basic first aid kit, the ouch pouch. If your kids are going fishing, camping, hunting, backpacking, Boy Scouts, make sure they got a kit.
Sure enough.
Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about the good folks over at Scalawag Tactical?
Yep. Head on over to Scalawag Tactical for all your blade needs and any of your scally swag. They sell more than just blades, but they do make some of the best blades that you can get. Really, honestly, there's no short of like a fantasy sword type thing that you're going to get from the mall. you're gonna find what you need at Scalawag. So head on over and use code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. Get yourself 10% off. And tell them we sent you.
And while you're at it, check out the good folks over at sigwoarms.com. Let me get the link there. Sigwo Arms is our latest sponsor. Sigwoarms.com again. That's the website. Use discount code Bigfoot5 for 5% off your order. And if you're a first responder or a veteran, they will up that to 10%. Just make sure you tell them at checkout. They are a firearms manufacturer. They make their own ammunition, and they're their source for all the brands you know and love. But they also do custom builds on their own, and they're pretty fantastic. I've got an AR they built that I'm pretty proud of. I love that AR. It's fantastic. It's very precision. It is a nice little AR. I've got a whisper pickle on it. That's a suppressor for those of you who aren't in the know. But they carry all of that from whisper pickles to freedom seeds through your favorite pew pew. And check them out. You know, this is a great time to pick one up because now you don't have to pay the tax stamp anymore on the whisper pickles. And it's a great time to grab one. So check them out. Again, sigwoarms.com. Here we go right here on the screen. And don't forget to use the discount code. So, folks, check them all out. And as Robbie and Doc and I have all discussed our books, you can find all of our books on Amazon.com in Kindle, print, and audio. And you can also find them on you can find mine on daroberts.net. But we're working on a new website called nightmarehunters.com. And when that site is up and ready, we'll have everybody's books on it. So definitely be checking all that. You can find the timeline for my books on my website, but Miss Lene's got the timeline for all of our books combined, and we'll be updating that and adding it to the website as it's built. So again, check them all out on Amazon.com. Between the three of us, over 50 books to keep you entertained for a good long time. And books also make fantastic birthday gifts and Christmas gifts and whatever gift you'd like to give. The gift of a book is an adventure they can have more than once. I hope you guys are a fan, and we'll let everybody know about that because the books is what keep the lights on. And I enjoy telling these stories. Like Steve brought up before, I've often said, and I'm going to always say it, stories are journeys that we take together. And I want to thank each and every one of you guys for taking those journeys with us. But before we wind the show down, I want to mention the 22 A Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that's 22 too many. So reach out and check on your friends and family who are first responders or veterans in any capacity. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care, because 22 times a day they're losing that battle with depression or PTSD. Don't let them fight those battles alone. Let them know that they're not fighting those battles alone. And remind them every day to not let the hard days win. So again, 22 a day. Folks, if you served in uniform and you need help, reach out. There are veterans groups that are there to help you. There's mission22.org, or reach out to somebody that you know, or one of us. I'd rather hear your story than read your obituary. And I may not be able to do much more than bend an ear, but I'm happy to do it. So, folks, again, remember the 22 a day. But one thing we've been doing on the show as we wind things down is something I'm pretty proud of, and I've been doing it for a while, and it's something I hope to always continue. is we've been into the show with a toast. And Steve, since we got you tonight, do you mind taking us out with the toast?
Certainly. I even saved a little bit of my adult beverage of choice here. And this is from the Parting Glass. Those who've heard it kind of referred to as kind of an Irish drinking song. But if you listen to the lyrics, it means a lot more than that. It means a lot more than that to us. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Joy.
Sláinte.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. Three lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel, Doc's a biter, makes the devil real. But DA's a shifty one, a shape-shifting soul, can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid, they'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rain. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jed and Doc transform with a howl, DA shifts, becomes a night owl. Together they stand a force so strong against the evil right in the road. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless